Okay. Hi, guys. Can you confirm in the chat box if I'm audible to you, and then we'll quickly start with the session? Okay, great, great. Thank you, Ankita. Thank you so much for confirming. Well, thank you so very much, guys, for coming up in such great numbers and spending your valuable time to attend this session so very much. Thank you so very much. Well, let's quickly start with the session, and I hope we are able to deliver a great session on your visa application tip that's going to be very helpful for your journey ahead, right? So before we quickly jump onto the session wherein we discuss about the visa application tips further, I'll quickly brief you about what GyanDhan does, and then we have Miss Swati with us who's going to guide you with the session further, right? So GyanDhan basically is India's first education finance marketplace, wherein we have been helping students with their education loan journey from the past 9 years now. We were established with the intent of making their the students education loan journey as hassle free as possible. We can do it for them, right? Since the past 9 years, we have been able to help more than 15,000 students till date. We have disbursed more than 5,000 crores and have had such great student reviews on multiple platforms that are available, right? We have partnered with more than 13 plus lenders in India, which makes it more easier for students to get the right education loan product available in the market. And that's the intent, to offer them the best product that we can give them based on their profile, right? If anybody of you who further needs an assistance regarding an education loan, feel free to contact us on our given email ID, or you can just also reach out to us via websites, right? We are available on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We also have a YouTube channel wherein we keep posting multiple informative videos on different education loan things and products, right? That keep coming up, and updates on the products, right? So that was a bit about GyanDhan. Now we have with us Miss Swati Patel Basan, right? She has been in the industry from past 14 years, who have been guiding with the visa process with different applications. So over to you, Miss Swati, right, to take the session ahead from here on.
Sure. Thank you so much to GyanDhan for having us here from Argo. It's a pleasure to be here and to help guide you and your clientele on how you can proceed with, F1 students and visas. So I've just got a little presentation I'll take you guys through and have some comments, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So
Uh, Swati, sorry to interrupt. I guess your video is not on.
for me, it's showing on. Can you see? Hello?
Guys, is the Swati visible on your screens? Yes, great. Then we can start.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So basically, just a quick introduction to our team. We've got many officers that are all former visa officers that have served in all the regions of the world. We speak 10 plus languages between us. We've got experience from all different kinds of visa categories. You name it, non-immigrant visas and immigrant visas, and we've seen it all between all of us. So you're coming to the right team when you come to us. So I know you're all interested, obviously, in F1s, and most of you, I understand, are master's students. So unfortunately, there is an increasing trend of refusal rates for F1s, and this is in general. So if you get called, if you are a Dropbox and you get called actually for your interview, then that is usually because they need something additional. They're not sure to just be able to approve you. So your best bet to come to us is at the very beginning, before you even go for your first chance, because then you'll know what to expect and how to prepare yourself. So these are the top challenges if you read, okay? So a lot of people always say to us that they didn't even give me a chance to explain. Okay, another common complaint that we get is that they didn't even see our documents. So you have to understand why this is. Those four other things that you see on your screen are very important. They're all related to each other. So the law presumes the people that have been denied, you get a 214B letter. Okay, what does that say? In layman's terms, the law presumes that you're guilty until innocent. Okay. So it's already presuming you're an intending immigrant. How do you overcome that? Okay. You have to have good communication skills. A US visa interview is very different than what you need to submit to get into whatever university you want to go to. You have to know how to present yourself and your case. And that is tied to confidence. You have to be able to speak very, very confidently, articulately to a US visa officer. The other thing here is the cultural context, which is very, very closely related because, especially to the Indian clientele here, unfortunately, it's just a difference in cultures. So a lot of clientele that we see here, they're used to you only answer what you're asked. And so usually the officers get 1 or 2 word answers, which is not helpful to you and not helpful to the officer either. So, or you're trying to be really nice, you're trying to make completely grammatically correct sentences, or you're doing all the niceties. Hello, officer, how are you? Those things are not actually very effective. There's a lot of other ways that you can use your time effectively, and you have to present yourself very confidently and articulate again. So this part where it says preparation is key, I really want to emphasize that because you want to put a full stop there. It's that important. You want to really be prepared. There's 3 main things on how you can do that. And I just want to discuss a little bit more about all of those. So you have to understand what an F1 visa requires. What is the officer looking for? Okay, it's listed here, but I want to delve into that a little bit more. Basically, an officer needs a few things, okay, to be able to approve your F1 visa. One is, were you a credible student? What does that mean? That means if you, for example, completed your bachelor's, because I understand a lot of your master's students. So once you did your bachelor's, what did you do it in? And what have you done since then? Or why did you choose that bachelor's? And is it in line with the master's? Is it in the same kind of program, in the same kind of field? Or do you have a career change? And why do you have that career change? Okay, so what kind of student were you in the past in terms of your degree and what you've done with it? If you're a high school student, then obviously maybe the extracurricular activities as well. Any internships also. Okay. And then what are you going to do? And you have to be able to present that. The other second really big important criteria for a visa officer is, do you have enough funds to cover the full first year and enough for the subsequent years of your study? Okay. So that has to make complete sense to the visa officer. And this third thing here is, what are you planning to study and why? Okay. What are you going to do with that degree? How does it help you? Why do you need it? Um, what difference is it going to make in your life? What are you going to do in your country when you come back with this degree? Okay. That is another thing the visa officer is looking for. Does this educational plan make sense? Okay. And another thing is, um, will you use this visa correctly? Okay, so F1 visa is duration of status, right? It's DS, duration of status. So you have time to do your studies, to complete your studies, and also certain, CPTs, OPTs, etc., are also sometimes part of the visa process. So, sorry, the student visa. So what are you going to do once you complete that? Even if your intention is to get the work experience in the United States on your OPT, or a lot of you, maybe your STEM OPT. Okay. Why is that valuable to you? How will it help you when you come back in your said industry? Right? These things are very, very important. If they think you're going to misuse a visa, that in itself is a, automatic no-no. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Okay, this is so, so important. I cannot emphasize to you. Um, so there are some here that are listed out. I would love for you to read them, but I want to also highlight a few more. So for a student, when I was talking about the credibility of student, it means if you're studying X, Y, or Z, how is that related to, why do you need to study that? Okay, is it a passion? Is there a lack of that kind of field in your country? Is there some potential for change? Do you have a do you have a confirmed job when you come back in your company, for example? For especially, a lot of MBA students, it's normal for them to take a break between their bachelors before they pursue their masters, because that is part of even trying to get into a good MBA school. They get some work experience. So how is that related? Okay, and that also ties into the clear vision plan of goals that I just kind of mentioned. The acceptance to a good university, this is important, but for students, a lot of times we see that you get stuck on the ranking. For visa officers, it's not so much about the ranking. There's hundreds and thousands of colleges and universities in the United States. A visa officer won't know all of them. They're not going to look it up necessarily at the time of the interview because they don't have time, right? So for i- the top tier ones, the Ivy League ones are obvious, okay? But it doesn't mean that you have, just because you get into them, you're automatic qualified for a student visa, okay? So you have to see uh, what are the right fits for you. And for a visa officer, they mainly want to see, why did you choose these universities? A legitimate student usually researches, okay, a lot of universities, decides what are the reasons they want to go to these universities and why is it the right fit for them, and they generally apply to anywhere from 3 to 5 universities. We commonly see they may get into a few of them, or they may get into just one or two of them, and that's okay. But you have to be able to make the case of why you're applying, why you chose these universities, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. Previous international travel in for an officer is generally important in any visa category, not just F1s, because travel shows to the visa officer that you have used another visa correctly. You have the means, the financial means to take care of your expenses, such as hotels and airfare and sightseeing, food, etc., and that you're not staying in a foreign country, you're coming back. So for a visa officer, if you've got good travel, it automatically is giving you a leg up that says, okay, well, if they've used the Schengen visa correctly, then they're likely to use their US visa correctly as well. Now, weaknesses, obviously, you see here, a lot of clients have siblings that study in the United States, and that's okay. Maybe your brother or sister wanted to study there, they studied there, but sometimes a lot of we see that they just stay. They want, their goal was never just to come back, it was just to stay and then get an H1B or marry or etc., and then they never return. In cases like that, um it doesn't help you so much, but there's always, you're still your own case, so you still have to present yourself why you wouldn't do the same thing. Okay, and again, this ties to the lack of commitment to returning. So you have to have a clear plan. An F1 allows you, again, to do CPT, OPT, STEM OPT, as long as you're doing that all legitimately and correctly. Sometimes there's transfers, those are all okay things. But if your goal at an F1 interview is that I ultimately just want to live in the United States, I want to get an H1B and then ultimately become a citizen or whatever it may be, then that is not really your intention, right? Your intention is not just to study. So you have to make it more about why you want to study in the United States and what you're going to do afterwards. You need to know what your game plan is after you complete that degree, even if it allows for OPT. What then? In your home country, in this case for GyanDhan clients in India, why does having X degree help you in said field, and what kinds of opportunities do you have? Do you already have a confirmed job, or is there lack of in opportunities in that space where you can then create? Are you interested into startups? You have to explain that very naturally, and you need to know that yourself, right? And then this is so important. Unfortunately, we see so many times clients that when we ask them why you applied to these universities or this particular university, unfortunately, they're giving the answers that they think a visa officer wants to hear. Okay. Usually it's something that they've memorized from the website, or they're speaking very robotically, or they're saying, uh, the student to faculty ratio is 1 to 20, and I really want that, and uh, been in touch with the faculty. It gives me great opportunities. It meets my requirements. All these kinds of generic things we hear a lot for students that are unprepared, that don't really know how to present themselves. Um, and you want to, uh, as I said, this is again related to the previous slide. You want to articulate a vision of how that experience is going to help you in your home country. The ones that we see that aren't so genuine, they have such a generic plan. Okay, so if you're a student, a genuine student, you have ideally research into why, which university fits for you, why you want to study this particular thing, how will it help you in your career path, in your life, etc. And a lot of times students will come and they are saying in their interviews that it will give me great career opportunities and job growth, and I can find a job in my field, uh, for my better future prospects, all these kinds of very generic things that don't actually say anything to a visa officer. Okay, so you have to know how to be specific, and you want to keep your answers natural. This is really, really important. This again goes to being robotic. You cannot become rote. If an officer thinks you're just memorized and come, then it will not help you, because they will not be able to assess, are you a genuine student who wants to study what you say you want to study, or are you trying to go for ulterior motives? And remember, again, the law is always presuming that you're an intending immigrant. So you're already guilty. You have to convince them otherwise. Okay. And it's very, very important. The US visa interview is very conversational, unlike a lot of other countries. It's not document heavy, it's what you are talking about. Okay. So how can we help you here? Every client is actually different. Everybody has a different case. Everybody has a different reason for why they need an F1 visa or any kind of other visa. Some people have denials, some people don't. Some people had a previous visa and now they want to have another visa. Strengths and weaknesses are not just on paper. So we can tell you what your strengths and weaknesses are on paper. When you fill out our questionnaire, it already alerts us to what are the potential obvious weaknesses, and we will highlight them for you. But also, once we talk to you in our consult, we try to understand what your situation is, what your overall life circumstances are, why you're studying this, and really get into the nitty gritty of it. Okay. And that is what helps us pull out the strengths for you, which is what you then present to a visa officer. And most clients don't understand this, especially students. They don't know what their potential strengths could be, or what are their home ties, or anything like that. So, being made aware of that, and especially in a mock interview when it comes into practice, understanding how can you bring those strengths into your interview, and then also, counterbalance the weaknesses you may have. Right, then mock interviews. We are all ex visa officers. We have experience from all over the world. I used to do 100 interviews a day, so we get a flavor of it very automatically. We know when somebody is kind of lying to us. When you get that letter, a visa officer is not obligated to tell you why they're denying you. You get a generic letter, right? So you will never know the exact reason you got denied, and you don't necessarily, they're not expecting you to know the exact reason you get denied, but we can help you understand how you present that. Okay. And especially with previous refusals, most people here do not know why they got denied. They think they had it all together. They don't even realize the reasons, um, the potential things that they think are okay, but that we as ex visa officers see, because we are looking at it from a perspective of what is a visa officer looking for. And a lot of our job in the consulates, especially if you've had a previous refusal, is helping you understand, okay, well, especially when you give us a synopsis of your previous interview, sometimes it's obvious to us why you're getting denied, and we can help you understand how you can answer those questions better, and what you're highlighting and how you need to highlight instead, and what you need to highlight instead. A lot of questions we get are, what documents should I bring? And this is almost for any category. So for the US government, as I mentioned, it's unlike a lot of other places. It's not document heavy. Obviously, there's categories that require documents, such as for a student, you will need your I-20. You will also need your CVIS fee receipt, and you will need to take with you, which is not what you automatically give, but the evidence that you can pay for the full first year and you're comfortable to pay for the remaining years. Okay. Everything else is supporting documents. You're taking that with you in the 1% chance that the visa officer asks. Okay. So that's, and you want to be really organized. We see a lot of clients in, that are taking their documents and they don't even know where they are. So you waste your interview time in trying to find that one piece of paper that asks for your loan document, for example, or your scholarship document. So you want to be nicely organized as well, and you're taking that for your kind of comfort and in that 1% chance a visa officer asks. So very minimum on the documents. If they It's more about the conversation. If they believe you, then you probably won't even get asked for anything. Okay. Now this other one. What if I have a relative in the United States? So you want to be honest. Okay. This goes to the point of honesty. You never want to lie on your DS 160 or in the interview, because that can really affect you forever. All the notes are always taken, especially during that interview, and even if you've had a denial before, the visa officer is seeing that already while you're at the window or even before you approach the window. So they know what you've said before. So if at one point you said no to a relative and now you're decided that you want to say yes, then you want to be able to explain that. So the best thing is to be honest in the beginning. It's okay if you want to be a student and you have a relative in the United States. In fact, for a lot of people, it's part of why they choose to go to a certain university, because maybe they're going to stay with their maternal uncle who already lives in the area, and therefore they won't have housing expenses. But that uncle has never filed for their immigrant visa petition. So these things are also important to say. Or maybe you have a relative that lives in a totally different city, and but you're going to study in the other side of the coast, but you still want to mention that you have that relative, even if you're not close to them. Like if you have a lot of times some people say that I have a relative but I'm not close to them, we don't have any ties. But it's important that you're honest about it, because it's asking you on the form you're signing that it's true. You can always justify it, but don't lie about it. All right. What should I wear? So you're a student, okay? They're not expecting you to come to your visa interview in a suit and tie, but uh, you are still going for an interview, okay? You want to be presentable. I like to tell clients that you want to be dressed in whatever gives you the most confidence, okay? Because that's so important. We already know that students are nervous when you approach the interview window. All visa officers grant you a little bit of leeway for nervousness, okay? But then if you're beyond nervous, they start to think in the negative kind of way. So the dressing is really important because it gives you confidence if you are feeling confident in what you're wearing. For a student, it's totally acceptable if you're wearing jeans and maybe a polo or a button down shirt. If you're going for your master's program, which I understand a lot of you from GyanDhan are pursuing masters, then maybe you have some years of work experience. Maybe you're going for a PhD, maybe you're going for an MBA. So you would dress accordingly. At least, general rule is business casual is on the safe side. And basically, that's the presentation. We obviously have a lot more we can cover, but I would actually like to open up this up to questions, because that is where we can help you out as much as possible.
Great, Swati. That was indeed a very helpful session. I'm sure many of them have got their or might have got their queries resolved already. I can see a couple of questions already in the chat section. What I'll do is I'll display those for you on the stage, and then you can take up those.
Okay.
So we have a question from Hardik asking, "Can the visa officer see my education gaps?"
Okay, so as in if you've in India, you've already and then you took a break. They don't necessarily see that you took a break or where you're graduating from. Okay, but a gap is not necessarily a bad thing. You want to explain that gap. Most people have a legitimate reason for why they have the gap. Okay, so if you are 24 now and you're pursuing your master's and you had a gap, sometimes the gap is for work, sometimes it's for family reasons, medical reasons, etc. So they're not necessarily seeing why you have those gaps. They're seeing, okay, if you had a previous F1 and then you came back and then now you had a long gap and then you're doing a master's, they can see that. But you want to explain any sort of gap.
Great. I hope Hardik that solves the question. We have another from Chaitanya asking, does it impact negatively if I have relatives in the US?
Okay, so it depends. Like I was saying, I talked somewhat about relatives. It's really important to be honest about it, okay? Because you can actually still explain that, and just because you have a relative in the United States doesn't mean you're going to get denied your student visa or any visa for that matter. There is, we can help you understand, well, what is the relationship to that relative? How is it related to you studying in the United States? How do you bring it up if you're asked about it? How do you justify it? It's so important for a visa officer to understand that and have that authenticity than you lying about it, because then it becomes a risk factor.
Great. We have another question from Hazel asking, what are the ideal amount of funds to show in the I-20 form for 1 year of study? Like how much is it supposed to be?
Okay, so yes, we do get asked this a lot. It's not a magic number, okay, that you're looking to have in your bank account. And unfortunately, what some people do is make the mistake of, let's say generally in their parents are financing it, and let's say generally they're monthly they have normally a lakh every month that gets deposited, and this is their normal for every their last 2 3 years. But right before the visa interview, then there's this large deposit. Okay, so for a visa officer, that's alarm bells, because they're thinking, well, how does this make any sense? They've only done it, this is not really how they live, they don't really have the finances, and they've just put it in just for the visa. So that will impact negatively. There is not a magic number. You want to, let's say you want to be, it should be evident or convincing to the officer that you have enough to cover your full first year very comfortably. That means whatever's listed on your I-20 and additional expenses. So if you are staying off campus, what about the rent? Okay, does that cover that? Is your financial capability enough to cover that? It's required that's full first year. All right, but then it's you should be comfortable enough to then cover the next. So a lot of people, if you have a scholarship, so many students forget to mention this, such an important thing. If you have a loan, you want to talk about that as well. And how, especially for a visa officer, how are you going to pay that loan back? How much percentage is that loan of your education? That is a very, very important key of how you explain as well.
Great. Oh, we have another question from Akshata asking, my sponsor withdrew my immigrant visa, but it's still under review. So now I'm planning to apply for an F1 visa, which is a non-immigrant visa. So how do I go about it?
Okay, so this is a matter of how you present. I'm not sure about still under review, as in it's not actually been uh, as in your immigrant visa petition has been canceled or not. It's not very clear, but regardless, it's about how you present it. So in the interview, you want to talk about that. Who filed for you? How long ago was that? Why have they rescinded the immigrant visa petition? And you want to again focus on your why you want this student visa. Why are you a legitimate student? Why will you not stay there? It does help you, obviously, if you had an immigrant visa and it's now not there, because sometimes if you have an immigrant visa and you're a student, depending, especially for people that are potentially aging out, this is a concern. Try to apply for F1 visas so that they don't age out and they have an IV petition pending. And that is a much trickier situation, which we can again help you navigate and how you present yourself.
Great. Harsha asks, do you recommend taking more than one I-20?
No, you should well, you should take any and all I-20s that you have, but the one you're presenting is the one that you're going for. Okay, so the current I-20 for the university that you're going for that is valid, that's the one you're taking. If it's been updated, for example, um, your I-20 before had a different course listed and now it's actually a different course listed, then you want to definitely take it. You want to get it updated and take it. You want to carry the other I-20s if you've had more than one as supporting docs in case you're asked. For example, maybe this question is related to, well, how many universities did you get into? And if the visa officer asks, well, let me see, the other I-20s or etc., and they're not believing you, then you obviously want to have them ready.
Right. We have a question from Rohan asking, does changing the proof or source of funds after getting I-20 affect negatively?
Just changing the proof or source of funds. So okay, so and I obviously the school is deciding how they're telling you the cost. They're deciding that are they going to admit you or not, and they're telling you the cost on this I-20, how much it's going to cost. Okay, and it says self payment, scholarship, etc. Okay, but let's say in between that, you still have the scholarship, but you've gotten, for example, a loan that helps you cover a little bit more of the expenses because your university is still expensive. So you want, if you've gotten a loan and that's going to help you cover it, you obviously want to take evidence of it in case you're asked, but you want to mention it in the interview as well. This another just a little bit else on this that might help others is I think sometimes we see that people mean it in, well, my parents are not paying but my uncle is paying. Okay, so in that sense you want to have, well, it has to make sense to the officer, well, why are your parents not paying and why is your uncle paying? And a lot of times that can make sense, but in that case you want to take those evidences as supporting documents.
Okay. We have a question from Omni asking, my sister is working in US with an H-1B visa. What are the chances of my visa getting approved?
Okay, so it's not just because she has an H-1B, you will get it or you won't get it. Okay. It's more about why do you want this student visa approved? It's more about you. Okay. And how you present. And if they ask about your sister, then how did she go to the United States? Does she have this H-1B because she wanted an F1 and got it? Or does she have it because she went via marriage? Or sorry, that was an H4. Okay. But how does she get this H-1B? Right? That's important. And are you likely to maybe do the same thing? Or what is your action plan? It's more about you than what your sister did in the United States. But you have to be prepared on how you present that and how you answer it.
Okay, we have a question from Mahesh asking, how to prove strong home ties?
Okay. So home ties is, it's not just it's financial ties, it's also familial ties. Okay. So for students, there is they're not expecting you to necessarily own property. You're somewhere in your young 20s. They're not expecting that you're necessarily going to have property. Some students do, and obviously that's a strength and you can bring it forward. Like for example, if you have a flat that's in your name and that you rent out and that's additional income or anything like that. So those are ties that help you. But for you, your ties is a lot to do with your intent. Okay, what are you going to do with that degree when you come back? Or a lot of times students make the mistake of in the interview when we're asking them mocks, well, who do you live with? They just say my family. But for a visa officer, that is not helpful because they don't know who is in your family. It is much better for you to say, I live with my dad, my mom, my grandparents, and I have two younger siblings. You want to be elaborate on that. And that helps them understand, okay, well, these are the ties that you have to come back to. I want to give another example here. I had others who had, for example, been engaged, but obviously in their DS 160, there's only married, single, divorced, etc. So you're not going to be able to put engaged. But that is a tie. If you already have, and it's very normal in this culture, you may be getting married at some point soon. You may have a arranged marriage or something like that. You may already have that, so that's that, but you don't even mention it. But that is such a big thing for you to mention if that is the case. So these things all collaborate for home ties.
Okay, we have a question from Sakit asking, what are the factors that we need to consider when answering why we are Sorry, I messed it that. What are the factors that we need to answer when we are asked why the US?
Okay, so I'm assuming this is why the US and why are you not pursuing this in any other country? Basically, you need to know that, okay? You would have understood why the visa officer is not going to know why it's better for you to necessarily study your mechanical engineering, for example, in the United States versus in Germany, for example, okay? So they will want to know your reasoning on when you're asked, like, well, why you could do this in your home country? Why didn't you pursue a master's there? Or a lot of students are going to Australia, for example, for this. Why are you not going there? Your reasons will be your own. For everybody, it's a little different. It's not a magic answer a visa officer is looking for. So there could be a plethora of reasons. It's not, you want to describe what your actual reason is. For the US, it could be for a lot of students, unlike other countries, they get practical hands-on training in a US education system that you don't get necessarily here in India or in other countries. And that is a big factor for why students want to study there, because they get it, then they can apply it, they can get the work experience, and then they can come back.
Okay. We have another question from Mahesh asking how to answer what will you do after masters?
Okay. So when in a consult, when a client is telling me that, I tell them, well, I'm not sure why you want to do a master's. You tell me why you want to do a master's. So we have to understand, you are the best judge of why you want this degree. You are spending good money on it. You're possibly taking out a loan for it. You're spending time. You're going away for your family for it, right? So what are your motivating factors on why you want to study this master's? Okay. And if you're investing all of this time, energy, and money into this degree program, then you must also have an idea of what it's going to give you, or what opportunities that you have in your country for it, or what you want to do with that. So at least at Argo, we can help you at least articulate that better when we understand, well, okay, why did you decide this? And then we can help you present that in an effective manner.
Okay. We have another question from Bhavya asking, does visa interview gets to know if we applied more than one I-20 apart from the one with which we went to the interview?
Okay, so especially if you've had a previous denial and it's a different university, yes, okay, that's an obvious one. In other cases, it usually helps you actually, okay, because the more, if you've applied to a lot of universities, then that kind of goes to, you've invested, you've taken the time to understand why these universities in particular. There's It's not usually a bad thing. There's only very few cases where it could be negative. So I'm not sure exactly in what case this person is referring to, but um, in the notes, yes, an officer will see when they're asking you, and when you're telling them how many universities you applied to, do you have those I-20s? If you have them, again, you want to be honest. That's the more important thing. We can help you justify why you might have more than one I-20, or why you decided not to use the other I-20, or why it was wrong for you. But it's better to be transparent and open about it than to hide it.
Okay. We have a question from Chaitanya asking, if I have completed my masters in India and I'm applying for masters in US again, what impression it creates on the visa officer? How can I justify this thing? Could this be one of the reasons to get rejected?
Okay, so when you're trying to do a double master's, there's a few things that are important. Okay, one is, if it's in the same field, why do you need the second master's? Okay, why did the first master's not serve you? If it's in a totally different kind of field, then why? Sometimes, for example, somebody will have they'll do maybe a master's in computer science, and then they want a master MBA. Okay, those things are still explainable, but for the visa officer, they need to understand, are you just trying to be a perpetual student in the United States and just extend staying there? Or do you have a genuine need or reason to have a double master's? How will it again serve you? Does it line up? Does it make sense? So your story has to make sense. It's not a made up story, it needs to be a genuine story. And we can help you justify that depending on what your situation is. But if it's just For a visa officer, if they perceive it as, well, you're just trying to be a perpetual student or some masters in the same field and it doesn't make sense, then yes, it could definitely be one of the reasons that you get rejected.
We have Dave asking, he's got low percentage in his high secondary school. Can this affect his visa acceptance?
Okay, so it depends because, see, when you're applying for US universities and colleges, they all have their own individual requirements of what you need to get in. Some have TOEFL, some have IELTS, some have GRE. It depends, right? So SATs in your case maybe they have, so it it will depend. But it's also, if you're a high school student and going for your undergrad, then also what did you do in high school? What are the extracurricular activities you did? Maybe you were an administrator in a certain club. Maybe you had, you were the president of another kind of elective club. What did you do? Internships, if you have a gap year. If you really want to pursue computer science and you had some time off, then uh, have you taken courses to keep up with the industry? So these things will definitely help you in getting a visa.
We have Abhi asking, does the subject choice like informatic practices and maths give me a leg up in the interview?
So it depends, okay? So it depends on how you're presenting it also, okay? If you're going and just talking, see, a genuine student will be able to almost bore a visa officer if we actually allow them that much time to talk about what they want to study and why. Okay, because we are not experts in your field, right? So when you go on talking about very specific things, okay, a visa officer may cut you off anyways, but it lets them understand that, okay, one, maybe he or she is passionate about this, okay, and two, they are really, on top of the industry on this field as well. Okay, so in that sense it can help you, but in terms of your subject matter of what you're going to study, it if it's specific, if it's very specific, then there must be a reason why it's specific, right? So we need to understand that so we can help you present it, why you specifically want to study informatic practices and maths, for example.
Okay, we have another question asking, is there anything specific on women clothing for F1 visa interview?
Okay, so this is interesting. I never get asked specifically by gender. So, again, you want to be presentable, okay? Whether it's men or women, you want to dress in whatever makes you feel really confident, okay? That's very, very important. And I would dress as if you were going maybe for, again, suit and tie not required for a student, but going for possibly an interview, for your, an internship or something, or business casual would be fine. um, Jeans are also okay for a woman. That's okay. Dresses are okay. Again, you want to be really comfortable and confident in what you're wearing.
Okay, we have another question asking, are there strong chances to get F1 visa if my education is sponsored through an education loan?
Okay, so this can be a little tricky, okay, because um, you don't it can work, it can also backfire, okay? If your visa is completely dependent on your student loan, that the only way you can pay for this degree program that's $50,000, for example, is fully loaned, then for a visa officer that's going to reflect negatively, because you have to have that will go under that 214B about the ties, okay? Because you have to have at least enough comfortably for the full first year. So then if you've taken a large loan, what is the game plan to pay it back? Why are you able to take a 20 lakh loan, for example, and because your father does X, Y, and Z, and an X amount is coming from your father, a Y amount is coming from your mother, you also have a savings for this much, you received a scholarship for this much, and for the remaining you've taken a loan which you can pay back in XXY amount of time, and you also have a job guaranteed, or you have lots more opportunities which will give you a higher salary, which then helps you pay back the loan within 1 or 2 years, for example. Being 100% financed through loan is going to usually work against you.
Okay, we have another question from Avinash asking, if I was refused in December 2023 and if I want to apply for F1 visa again, so what are the chances of me getting an emergency slot?
Okay, so emergency slot is probably not going to be approved. Expedited reasons are really, really strict, especially after COVID. And there's a lot of kind of people that want expedited reasons. And in general, if you've already been denied once, you're not going to get that same. You're going to have to wait. So you are always welcome to try. In your portal, you have on the left the expedited appointment request. You can do it, but it's probably unlikely. Also, another thing that students are not prepared for sometimes, if they don't get the interview, then you have to be prepared that will your university allow you deferment, and what are you going to do then if you get deferred in that time. Also, the other thing is the in India definitely is that in all over the world in general, when student visa season comes, they have a lot of times where they're doing specific days just for student visas, or it's just busier at that time because they open up a lot more appointments for student visas because they know that students have to get to their orientations and classes. So in general, students are able to get appointments before they need to show up to classes.
Okay. We have another question from Sairam asking if the question asked by visa officer is not audible, can we ask to repeat? Is that a negative sign?
No, so that's okay. Okay, a lot of time it's much better than not understanding the question or not hearing the question and answering something different. Because what will that do? That will just frustrate the visa officer. So if you didn't hear or you didn't understand it, even you can say, "I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?" Or "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that word," or "I didn't understand the question. Can you ask me another way?" That's okay, and it's better than totally answering something different, because your second question is going to come based on how you're answering that question. So it's really, really important.
We have a question from Harsha asking, I'm from ECE. I'm going to convert to data science in masters. How to answer this question? Why are converting to data science?
So what is ECE? I'm not familiar with that. Can you tell me?
Harsha, if you could specify that in the chat box so that we can take this question up later. Okay, so we have another question from Saket who's asking, do visa counselors know about how many or what universities we have applied?
No, not necessarily. So if you've been denied, yes, and if it was mentioned in your previous interview, yes, they would know. But no, they're banking on you to tell us. Okay, so you and usually for most students, it's helpful for you to tell us which universities you applied to and how many universities you applied to and how many you got admitted into. But a lot of students sometimes think that that's what they're definitely going to get asked, and therefore they have a ready answer for it. But the visa interview is not like that. There's no set questions that they're going to ask you in a certain format. So they can ask you anything. It's more about how you are able to present that. It could be one university, right? Which is not necessarily, but it would be five. But why and how?
We have a question from Rohan asking, for the I-20, can I show savings account balance in four different accounts of both my parents? By the time I get I-20, my loan will also be processed. So should I wait for the loan to get the I-20?
You don't necessarily have to wait for the loan to get the I-20, okay? But you want to ideally make it as easy as possible on the officer, okay? So the more important thing, they're going to ask you about those finances as supporting documents in case they want to approve you for a visa and they believe you're a genuine student, and they say, okay, well, let me understand, how are you paying for this $48,000 a year. So in that case, if you want to be able to present it, if you are paying from four different sources, then because it's still your parents but it's combined, that's still okay, but you want to be able to explain that. Or it's more about presenting that in the interview, that my parents are still paying but they have two different accounts because there's a work account and there's a personal savings, and part of it is also loan, etc. And then if the officer asks, that's when you present those documents.
We have a question from Chaitanya asking, does it affect negatively if you say you're going to work part-time to support your education when you're showing your education is sponsored through education loan?
Okay, so one, it will depend on if you're allowed to work. Okay, so depending on your particular university or particular course, how many hours are you allowed to work? Is it on campus? Is it off campus? Those things you want to abide by no matter what. Okay, so if you're allowed to work, you can work and you can say that it's part of um, that's how you're going to pay back your part of how you're going to pay back your education loan. But for most students, they're not the ones who are able to solely sponsor their education. It's usually their parents, right? So, or a combination of parents, scholarship, and loan. So if this is one of the factors to help you pay for it, then you can talk about it. But it cannot be the main factor because it won't necessarily make sense to a visa officer.
We have a question from Gurmeet who's asking, is it easier to move to the USA for masters if I've already got a Canadian student visa?
Well, that depends, okay? Because thinking from the visa officer brain, my natural inclination is to say, well, why didn't you use your student visa, of your Canadian student visa, or did you use it, and why is that enough? Why do you need a second master's now in the United States? So a visa officer is going to look at it from that lens. But if there is a reason that makes sense, and now you need a second master's in the U.S. because your Canadian university, for whatever reasons, it wasn't the right fit, or you didn't finish the degree, or maybe you never went. I don't know. It will depend case by case on this thing. It's not a automatic kind of uh, cookie cutter answer.
Okay, we have a question from Sakit asking, during the interview, does the father's occupation or income matter? Are there any negative signs if we have good grades but less income of father?
Okay, so it's not necessarily just the father's occupation or income. It will matter about where are the source of funds coming from. So if it is your father that's principally paying, then yes, it will matter. Okay, because how does he make the funds per annum that he can contribute and pay for this education? Okay, so yes, you want good grades. If you have good grades, ideally, you've probably also gotten a scholarship, right, to go to the university, some scholarship. And but if they can't pay, or your family can't pay, or you don't have other supporting evidence, then that will definitely affect a reason of not getting a visa.
Okay, we have another question from Suyuk asking, adding on to the question of how many universities one has applied to, does it come off as a negative sign if I applied to 10 universities?
I think we rarely ever see somebody who's applied to so many universities. Generally, students anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes maybe 7, is usually what you see, whether it's bachelor's or master's kind of program. So if you've applied to 10, maybe the visa officer will be surprised about it, and they'll ask you, well, why so many? And you should just be able to justify why so many. It won't necessarily be negative. Maybe your reasoning is that didn't want to risk not getting into one. Maybe you wanted to be in particular regions of the US. It could be a variety of reasons.
Okay, we have another question saying, I have a tuition fee waiver and a health coverage from my university, and I will be having an education loan to pay for the rest of my expenses. Do I still need to show my parents' bank statements?
Okay, so the statements will only be asked for if the visa officer asks, okay? But you do want to carry it, okay? If this is not going to be paid in any other way besides loan, tuition waiver, and health coverage won't necessarily be a deciding factor for a visa officer because that is pretty minimal, okay? Tuition waiver, yes, but then the officer still needs to understand, well, where are you going to stay, and how are you going to pay for that, and where are the other funds coming from? Is it your savings, or why is it that there's no other sponsorship here? So it will have an effect. So you want to carry anything and everything that's going to help you pay for this for sure, and explain and justify it.
Okay, we have a question from Nishta asking, I have traveled to the US on J1 last year and is subject to 2-year home residency rule. Will I be able to get a F1 for this year? Also, will I be able to do STEM opt on F1? My course is STEM.
Okay, so the 2 year depends on if you've already done your 2 year residency rule. Unless you have a waiver for your J1 of the 2 year residency rule, then yes, you still have to complete that before then you'll be able to get your F1. And for the F1, yes, if you can do a STEM OPT on your F1 if that's what's allowed to. That's okay.
We have a question saying, is it true that acceptance or rejection of the visa depends on the university which we've applied for? For example, if the student has applied to nationally top ranked universities, is there a good chance of acceptance?
Okay, so I think somebody asked something about this earlier, or I might have mentioned it in the presentation. It's not just about Students are much more concerned than visa officers are about the ranking. Okay, yes, community colleges, it's definitely a harder one to overcome, but in general, unless you're in the obvious Ivy League schools, okay, they're not necessarily going to know all the colleges and universities, right? So you have decided why you're applying to these universities or this sort of particular tier of universities. Maybe it's because of the finances, maybe it's because of the financial aid, maybe it's because of the weather in the region, maybe it's because you know people that went there. There's so many different reasons, and those are the reasons that need to come across. So, but it's also not an automatic that because you got into a Harvard or Yale that you're going to get to go, because university admissions processes are different. If even if you're getting into top tier rank university, but your intention of what you're going to do with that degree afterwards is not lining up, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get an F1 visa.
Okay. And guys, we're taking up this last question because we have a time constraint as well. What are the common mistakes an applicant can make in a visa interview, and how should we avoid it?
I love that this is the last question, actually. So thank you for whoever asked that, because okay, so I will try to summarize this. So a lot of times it's that robotic answer. Okay, you have memorized something off of the website of why this university matches your needs. Okay, and that is not going to fly with a visa officer. Or you are just saying something really generic. You have no game plan for what you want to do afterwards. You're not able to answer confidently. There is a We are at Argo provide you a strategy of understanding how to present yourself, how to present how you can help the visa officer actually approve you. So, robotic answers don't work when you're just saying one thing and a visa officer has to ask you a follow-up question on the same subject matter. That is not helpful to you. You have to think of every question as an opportunity for you actually to give the visa officer a full context and picture. In India, it's very quick, the interview. My last assignment was here in Mumbai at the consulate. It's like a minute you get, right? So you have to be able to present yourself really, really confidently, really strongly, and especially your strengths. So, and counterbalance those weaknesses.
Okay, that was it. I can still see a lot of questions coming up, but sorry guys, we still have a lot of time constraint. So even if your queries are not answered, feel free to reach out to us on our email IDs. Right, we'll help you with the queries so that you can get those resolved. I hope we were able to deliver a great session for all of you guys, and it is going to be very, very helpful for you in the future as well. Thank you for being such a great audience for us. Thank you, Swati. It was great having you too for the
Yeah.
session. Thank you so
Thank you.
very
I
much.
just want to put one more thing in. I think it's really important that you are prepared. You don't want to risk it. Okay. So if you want the right, legitimate preparation, please do reach out to us. Okay. You check us out on argovisa.com. Just send us an email at hello@argovisa.com. We're more than happy to help you get set up with the right kind of consultation you need and prepare you for your student visa.